Hi everyone, hope you can hear me clearly. Could you please help me out by giving some hands up here that I'm audible? So I hope you can hear me clearly. Could you please help me by giving some response from your side, guys? In the chat, I can see if you reply in the chat. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your input here. Happy that you have answered me. So guys, we'll start in within 5 minutes. I'm just waiting for everyone to join so that they don't lose the content that I want to deliver today. So just give me a few minutes for them to join. So I hope so. You have a better understanding about about React, and today I'm going to talk about Redux here, and I'm going to have these two applications set up. So I hope so you can see my screen what I'm going to talk about today. Just give me a minute about it first. So friends, you can see that I have my two folders set up here. One is basic Redux folder, one is your React Redux folder. So friends, first this basic Redux folder will help me out to actually set up my Redux without any React implementation. All right. And the next one that I have React Redux folder. In this React Redux folder, I will talk about React plus Redux altogether. Right. So why I made this two different folders, right? Because I want to understand Redux first. After I get a clarity about Redux, I will move to React plus Redux, where actually my Redux is going to be state management for my React application. And that will help me understand how actually the React application gets the data from the Redux state, right? Or I can say Redux store. So basically, we'll see somewhere that what exactly I'm going to do. As you can see the demo that I've showed you before the starting of this session, I saw that there's some to-do application, right? And most of the time people show this to-do application in implementation of Redux or something else. But why I've taken the same example? Well, friends, I have taken the same example because most of the time you might not get me and you might not get my help, right? So to get a understand about this thing, you will find the same resource everywhere on the internet by some other people as well. So I thought of that I should go with that flow only so that it helps you to understand more about it, right? So what I'm going to do today, so we have a to-do application, all right? I'm not pretty different from other people, it's just the same to-do application, but I have some validations here that I will do. So the to-do application is going to actually have something, an add to-do option. So we'll do an add to-do. Number two, we will be able to update my to-do. Number three, I will be able to delete my to-do. And as the last one is actually I can view all the to-dos, right? So that's what my application will do. So with my application, I'm going to do some validations. All right. So when I say validation, what exactly Kuldeep I want to do with validations? Number one validation that empty to do cannot be part of my application. Right? Cannot be part. So I say cannot be part of my application. Right? So friends, now I hope so. That makes sense, right? That my data is sanitized. So empty to do. What exactly the empty will do for me? Number two, right? So number two, my to-dos should not be more than 50 characters, right? So if I want to write some to do, it should be more than 50 characters. That's what I have also implemented from my side, that yes, it should not be more than 50 characters, right? The last one, friends, I hope so that also makes sense. So my to do should be more than 8 characters, just like my password, right? So we generally see that the password should be more than 8 characters. So I planned this thing that my to-do should be more than 8 characters, and it should not be more than 50 characters. So I can say it should range from 8 characters to 50 characters, right? That's what I have planned about. I hope so it makes sense to all of you guys. Now, as I can see that I have 4 things to do with my to-do. So basically, these 4 things has to be implemented by me, right? And whenever I do perform some an action that I want to add a to do, I want to update a to do, I want to delete a to do, my state or my store or my Redux state should get update with my new data. That's what I'm going to plan today. All right. And later we'll see the same application development by using the React plus Redux. I hope so the agenda is clear to all of you. Can you have some comments about it? Is it clear to all of you or not? So friends, I hope so you can give some suggestions to me whether it is clear to you or not. All right, I can get some views from you guys. Yeah, it is clear. Right, thank you. All right, let's move further now. So now how to start my Redux, right? Actually, to start Redux, we have to think about my states first, right? Without thinking about the state, I cannot move to Redux, right? Is it not required every time if I need to create any application in the React? Is it required? Answer is very clearly no. I don't require it. Until unless I don't find my state getting bigger with some extra stuff, I don't need this Redux. But if you create an application where you have multiple state variables to hold and the state get changed, right, by doing some actions, right, and then the Redux comes into the picture so that it can help me out to take the initiative to update my state by using some external functions, not my into the Redux or my I can say about my React components, right? So what I'm going to do is that I mentioned here that we'll do some add to do, we'll update a to do, we'll delete a to do, and we'll actually view the to dos as well as my application is given to you. Now, how to start creating these things? So friends, when I talk about this thing, make sure that you do follow this kind of steps because this is going to help a lot in the future, right? So whenever I talk about Redux, right, I have to maintain some folder structure. Generally from my side I prefer this thing. I'm not saying that you have to follow this thing only, it's recommended from my side that you should generally do this folder structure. This will help a lot to you and to your friends who are working with you, right? So what the folder structure looks like, number one folder structure is say that I should have a Redux folder, right? Basically I'm talking about Redux, so it should be contained under a single folder within a Redux. That's great, Kuldeep. But friends, do you think so that if I talk about Redux somewhere, I'm going to use it right as a some different packages, some different files? Well, as of now, I might need some other files. If I do this thing that I need one file containing my actions, I need one file containing my other stuff, then friends, I think so. We need to actually have something about application. That is, I need to initialize this application by using npm. All right, so what I mean to say here that if I need the Redux folder to be used with different files all together combined in a single application, then I can't create like that, right? So as we learned about HTML, right? In HTML we use JavaScript files. So what actually happens? How the JavaScript files talk to each other. One file of JavaScript, script 1, cannot talk to script 2 file until unless they are actually put together in a single HTML file, right? What I mean, I hope so you can understand. If you are not able to understand, I can give you example right now. So let's take in this example that this folder is actually having one file with a name index.html, right? So friends, it's not a big deal for me to create any index file, right? It's just a simple HTML file and it simply shows this data. Now that is totally fine. But if I have two files in the Redux folder, right? Let it be script1. I'm just writing JavaScript files, script1.js, and one more file with the name script2.js. Well, friends, if script1 file and script2 files contain two different functions, let it be script1 file contains some function and script2 file contains sub function. Okay, so this function, its name is sub, and it simply does two numbers a and b and return a minus b. Simple, nothing else. And my function sum takes a and b and returns a plus b. That is also fine. But can I call that sum function inside the script 2? Or can I call the sub function inside the script 1? The answer is pretty clear, guys. No, right? Friends, so we can't do this thing. So if I need to call this function script 1 function in the script 2 or the script 2 function script 1, we need this both functions somewhere together, right? So what the at the end what we do actually, we simply go to this file and we say that script should be added here. We add a script tag here, right? And we simply close the script tag here. The script has to give a source. The source is actually in the Redux folder. I have script 1. In the Redux folder, I have script 2 as well. Now, if I have to call that two function, friends, I can do using the script tag again here and script open, and I can do sum. And I can write here 1 and 2, pretty difficult, right? And sub 4 and 2, right? As this function returning something, so I can write console log about these things. Okay. So when I do a console log of this function, it works simple, right? So if you're not aware of this thing, friends, let me tell you that this is must that you should understand this thing, because many people talk about Redux with the React directly. I don't want to do that, right? Now after doing this thing, friends, I can simply go and open my browser. If I open my browser, friends, you can see that I can get an output about it, right? Let me just open my browser here. So you can see here, if I go to inspect in my browser, right? If I go to console, I can see 3 and -1 is working totally fine, right? I hope so it's making sense to all of us that how exactly the things without the other things, right, works. So I'm not talking about anything about JavaScript. It's just a basic HTML file where actually I have JavaScript and this is working totally fine. All right. So let's come to our VS Code once back, right? Because the VS Code is going to help me a lot. So I have to go to switch back to my VS Code again. Now, friends, I don't need to do this kind of stuff. I don't need an HTML file here. I just need to maintain my folder structure, right? So friends, when I have to maintain my folder structure, I have to close this file. I don't need it. I have to close this as well. So these two files are not required as of now. I can delete these files totally fine, right? And if I have this basic Redux folder, I have to make this folder work fine for me. And by doing this, right, what I have to do is I have to actually do something that is npm init, right? So I go here. So I go to this folder. Okay. So I go inside this folder that is basic Redux. So inside this folder I have to go. I simply write about cd and my folder name is basic Redux. I have this small issue with my laptop today. Okay. So I'm in the basic Redux folder now. So inside this folder, friends, I have to do just npm init. Now, friend, when I say npm init, it simply ask me that what I want to do. Just like I have to a plenty option that I will choose. I will simply press enter and enter, nothing else. You can see it simple say that what is the package. I say okay, this is a basic Redux only version 1 and description, entry point, test point, this all this. Everything is fine with me. Yes, I'm happy with that. So friends, now I have one package.json file here, right? As of now, I don't have any concern with the package.json file because I know about React as well, so I don't need to worry about it. Let me just close this file. So what I can do now, I need to understand that I can create different files and the functionalities of one file can be used in another file. That's what I need to learn today, right? First. So I go and create one folder, right? And the folder name is now Redux. Okay, again, I'm back to same basics. In the folder name Redux, I have one file again. So I can say my module1.js. I have one my module2.js. Okay, so I will create one more file module2.js. So if I understand these two things, I will be able to understand more about it, right? Again, I will do the same thing. So module2 has this again function sub that takes a and b and it returns now a minus b. I copy paste in the same thing in the module1, change the function name to sum, change the sign from negative to positive and make it like that. All right. But friends, when I talk about this thing, these are two files now. I want to use the module 1 or module 2 function in module 1 and module 1 function in module 2. That's the vice versa. How come I can do this thing? Right? So let's try to understand this thing. Can I get the module 1 data? So as we have learned in React, actually, we use the import keyword, right? So that import is used to import the data from some other file. So before I do this thing, I just need to do something about it. I write here import. Right, so friends, if I write import here, so this is not going to work for me as for sure this is React, right? But here I'm not using React, so I simply write const and let me say module 1 equals to a right here keyword is required. Now when I say required, friends, I have to write just a module 1 path here. So I don't know what is going to come from module 1. We'll check it out first. Okay, without doing anything extra, I don't want to see that what the module 1 will contain, and then only I will move to the other stuff. Okay, so my module 1 going to be using actually module 2, so I have this small change. All right, now friends, I can see that this function or this file can be executed using node, right? I learned about this thing, right? I hope so you know about this as well. So if I write node and in the Redux folder, if I go and give a file name as a module 2, right? So my module2.js file contains one line where actually I'm talking about that please get the module 1 and print the module 1, and then I'm not calling the some function, so this function will be there as of now. Okay, now if I do this thing, friends, you can see I press enter, it gives me curly bracket, right? Or I can say an empty object. So friend, that is actually I need to understand first. It means my module 1 can be used inside the module 2. First of all, we learned about this thing, how to get module 1 in module 2. Yeah. But thing is, friends, we are not getting the module 1 sum function here, right? That's what we need to get. So how to get a module 1 sum function inside my module 2? So for that, I hope so you might know the answer, but some people might don't know the answer. So I'm just doing that stuff. So friends, if I need this module 1 function sum to be here in the module 2, I go to module 1. Just like in React, friends, we write export, right? Or we write export default like that. In module here, into my this npm init for project, if I talk about, I have to do just small part here. I have to write export for sure, but not like this way. Not write this way, friends. I have to write module dot export. Now, friends, when I do module dot export, I'm writing sum here, right? So let's see it very carefully. I'm writing module dot exports. Make sure this keyword is very clear to you, right? Module dot exports. Now, friends, again I will go back and again I will execute my module 2.js file and let's see what the module 1 contains now. Now, friends, when I hit this thing, I can see somewhere the data is changed from the curly bracket to this array sign, right? I can see very carefully that this is coming as the array sign here. So friends, I can just wrap this function just like curly bracket again because I want to make it an object type data, right? Now when I do this thing, friends, what actually happens, you can see now it looks somewhere curly bracket, there's a key with the name sum, it contains a function as a value. And that's what I need to learn. That if I need to export some functionality of one module part to another module 2, I can do this thing easy. It's just module.exports and pass that key value pair. Well, we all know about JavaScript. If I don't need to pass the key as a different, right, I want to use the same key as a value name, I use this thing particularly, right? So this is what I have learned here. So if you're not aware of this thing, you can write some, actually some. So that makes no sense in JavaScript if you know about JavaScript, right? So I expect this thing. This is again a part I don't need to. I can write like this thing. I can expect my module 1 data to be traveled to module 2, right? So did you understand this thing? Did you like this thing? Or anything that you want to say about it? I'm pretty here to learn more about this. And friends, please do ask your friends to also join here because I hope so. Till now, we have just starting and talking about only basic stuff, right? I want to gain more knowledge about Redux. So please, you can ask your friends as well to join here. All right. Now, if I understand this thing, friends, that's why I want to make sure because until unless you don't know this thing, you won't be able to make a Redux application without React, right? So that's why I want to make this thing today before we start the session. All right, so I hope we learned about these modules, how actually import can work here, right? So there's nothing like import keyword here. We have a required to actually get the data, right? So make sure we are using require here. Now, friends, you can see the module one is actually an object, right? It's an object type. So from that object type, friends, what I just need to take a sum, right? Now, friends, if I take sum from there, I can now call sum. I can pass two numbers from here, and I also this sum is going to return some data to me. Let's say result, and we can write console log of the result. Right, friends? So if I now try this out, you can see the answer is pretty not here. Just a minute, I did this small line error. So as we can see, sum of 3 and 5 is 8. Yeah, pretty difficult, right? So it's just an 8 here. So that makes sense, right? So we can see module 1 data can be exported from module 1 and can be imported in module 2 using the module.exports functionality from module 1 and require function from module 2. All right, makes sense to all of you. I hope so. So friends, I'm not talking about Redux right till now. So I just need to understand this basic fundamental. And I just need to teach one more basic fundamental, friend, that what I can do for my default exports. So it is a named export I can see very clearly, right? So how I can get my default exports. How to do that thing, right? That's pretty new, right? So let's try to understand how actually we can say that if I do a default export. Now here you can see that actually I'm writing sum directly, right? So when I write sum directly, it is a named export. No, it is a default export. So if I have a default export, friends, what I can do here? I can write here directly sum. Let's try to see if I write directly sum. So did it worked? Pretty clear, right? It worked totally fine. So that's what I need. That is a default export, right? So I hope so this makes sense to all of us that how exactly the data can be transferred from one module to module 2 or from module 1 to module 2, right? So it's a time for me to actually now go for my Redux. So here actually I have to do set up my Redux folder structure. If I'm good with this thing, friends, I can move further. All right, so these modules are not required for my application setup, so I will simply go and take it out from here. Okay, so I'm good with this modules outside from my folder structure. So that's what I made here. So I can just put this thing as a knowledge, right? So I made this knowledge transfer. So just for my knowledge, it is there. So I put these three files inside my knowledge. All right, so we are good to go, right? And now let's talk about Redux. How the Redux is going to do set up the folder structure. So Redux says, friends, I just need one folder with the name actions. I just need one more folder under my Redux is actually my reducers. I just need one file. Make sure I'm talking about one file that is going to be index.js. All right. So how exactly things will work, right? So let's try to understand what will actually happen, right? So we'll simply say will user will dispatch an action to add a to do, right? So you will try to dispatch an action at to do, right? So you will try to dispatch an action with a payload. Okay. So he will try to send a payload of the to do item text, right? So what will happen, friends? So as he wants to see state to get update for to dos, right? So he will subscribe your store. So that's what I want to do. So after you dispatch an action, right? After dispatch an action, reducer will update a state and return the new state. So reducer will take care of this thing. So reducer knows how to update the state according to the action performed by user. That's what I will do, right? After reducer will update a state, my store will be updated and will notify the subscriber that yeah, your state has been updated. You can just retrieve the data again. That's what, friends, I will do, right? That's what I need to do. So I will take this thing out and I will again put this thing in the knowledge transfer. And I hope so you learned about the readme file, right? So I will go here and paste it here. That's totally fine. I will close the file. Don't need it. So let's see what the action folder will contain. Friends, as I'm talking about one type of action that is about my to do. Might be there another things into my application. It could be my user action. A user could be added, a user could be deleted, user could be updated, right? So it might be that I have multiple things. I have admin, right? I have managers. So I have multiple things that I can do with my application. And for that kind of structure, I want to maintain the action in different files about each and everything, right? Specific to that only. So currently I have one action that I'm talking about. So I have to do's only. So I will create one file with the name to do actions. So what this file will do, friends, this file will contain some actions about only to do, right? So I'm going to contain to do actions. So what I can do, friends, number one is I have to add to do, right? I have to do add to do. So let's see how exactly the actions look like. But friends, when we talk about this action, they don't have to do much here. So I just write here simple function. Let me write add to do. Okay. So what this function does, friends? So when I do this thing add to do, right? So when I do this thing, friends, add to do, I will need to do something about it. So after I do add to do, I can see that I'm writing this return. I'm returning a simple plain object. You can see very clearly I'm returning an object here, right? This is an object. And friends, when I say add to do action, you can see very clearly this is add to do action. I say I want to add a to do. So friend, what this add to do is? So we'll simply define a constant variable that will contain the add to do as a string type with same thing. And this is not a big deal for me. It's just the same thing. All right, looks good. Now, friends, when I do add this add to do, I don't need to do much about it, right? It's just a simple plain thing I want to do. So we'll see this function returns this object only. Just like this function, friends, I might have multiple to do. So I can say add, I can write here update to do. I can write my delete to do, right? I don't need to actually view to do, so just to do's. So friends, that's what I'm going to do, add, update and delete to do. So just like my add functionality, friends, I will have function of update to do. What the update to do function will contain, friends? The update to do function will contain my update to do and the payload to update. But friends, which one has to be updated, right? I hope so. I'm pretty sure that the which one has to be updated. So friends, when we talk about this one, right, which one has to be updated, I have to think about it very clearly, right? So friends, I have to update about it. So as we all know that we have this session today going on YouTube, right? So you have to understand everything. So this session, I right, so I have shared this with everyone. So you can just join there as well. So friends, I can see that my to do needs to get the data, right? So when I talk about this, my to do needs to get the data for update. I need to get some ID which I have to update, right? So friend, how I can do this thing? Which ID has to update? So when I say which ID, I need to get that ID, then only I can update that to do, correct? So we'll take a help of this thing, friends. We say that I need to take an ID also. So the payload that I need to take is that I need to take an ID. So I say ID and new to do I need to take, correct? So when I say ID and new to do is required, I say the payload will contain these two things, correct? So when I say payload will contain these two things, you can understand that ID and the new to do is requiring these two things. So when I say updating this, right, the ID and the new to do will actually get the data updated. And the last function, friends, what I need is that I need to update my to do with a delete to do. I will write delete to do. And friends, when I say delete to do, I hope so we are pretty clear that for deleting, I need an ID, right? So friends, when I say ID is required to delete a to do, I will pass the type as delete to do and the payload will be ID. I hope so it makes sense to all of you. I am just looking for the comment as well if there's something that I need to see. All right. So coming back to my things. So I hope this functionality is done. I'm doing this thing all and now it's time for me to actually export these functions outside this file. So friends, when I say export this function out of this file, what I have to do is that I write this export, that is this function, that is module.export equals to this thing. So my module will export this all things, that is I want to export add to do, update to do, delete to do, add to do action, update to do action, and delete to do action, right? So I will export this all things. Well, pretty good. I'm done with this file. Now after doing this, my to do right actions is for me to actually go and talk about reducer, right? So reducer is something that is going to actually do the magic, right? A to do is just an action that we talk about, that is just an action. So when we talk about this thing, right, how exactly this has to work, so plenty of things has to do a lot, change the state. So when I have to change the state, friends, I need to make sure that the state should get changed, right? And when I talk about the state, it has to get changed. Then we have to think about it very clearly how to change the state. So well, I say that if there's some error, right, I have to make the state change, right? If there's something, I can say that there might be that the data is correct, I have to make the data in the state change, right? So there are a lot that I have to understand, right? So I hope so you can understand this thing, right? So let's try to make a reducer now. So what the reducer will do, friends, again it should be a to do reducer because I might have multiple things. For them I need to make their own personal reducer. So for me it is to do reducer. So friends, basically you have to understand how the reducer is going to manage the state. So whenever this is a state, right, we have to make sure the state should have something initial state, right, from where it has to start, right? If I say talking about the state, I need to make sure the default value should be there for sure first, right? I said, okay, I want to sum first 10 numbers. Friends, if I have to sum first 10 numbers, I have to make sure that sum should start from 0. If I have to multiply 10 numbers, I have to make sure the first number start with 1, right? Okay, so I'm pretty need to clear before we start the reducer. That's what I'm going to plan right now. So because as I plan that my validation will be there, and I have to make sure while doing the validation I do not miss anything about my state. So friends, I will do something about my const. I make my initial state here. And the initial state, friends, I want to have actually the is to dos. And friends, as I know that there might be multiple to dos, so I write multiple to dos. It should be actually an array, right? So when I say array, I have to make sure, friends, the array, and I might get some errors, right? So first of all, I simply say there is no error. I will make sure that there is no error, right? I don't want to make sure my state should have an error as an initial state. So friends, I have to dos. I might get some error, so I might get. So if I don't have any error, I won't show the error. Okay. Now this is my initial state. Now it's time for me to make my application reducer. So I make my const reducer. So friends, I will just name it as reducer, and this function is going to be, sorry for that, I just need to make a reducer simple function. And whenever we talk about reducer, friends, I have to make sure that I take a state and return an updated state. Simple, right? I will take a state and returns a new updated state. All right, so I will take a state. And friends, when I talk about this thing, I just need to just write something about it. I will write it again from my side. And friends, when we talk about state, I have to make sure that the state is going to have default value coming from my side at the initial state if there's no state given from my side. That's what I'm going to say. So I have an initial state beforehand only, and I might have some action. So what is the reducer here, friend? It's just a normal function, nothing else. It's just a normal function inside JavaScript. The function name is reducer. I can change it to anything. You can give it a root reducer, whatever thing you want to write. It's up to you. No one will ask you why you're writing this thing. So as I see that most of the people write recommended way is a reducer, I write reducer only. And it takes a state, and I'm giving a default state as an initial state. So whatever the state I want to give from my side as initial is going to be this one. And I might get multiple action, friends. So Redux gives me a default action, right? So later I will pass my action from my side. I will dispatch action, and Redux will take care of that. I don't need to worry about it. And friends, I might have multiple actions, right? So we'll do something about it. So we write a switch case here. So friends, I write a switch case, and what could be the case of my? I can write action dot type, right? As I learned about this thing that I might have multiple actions, friends. So I learned about different actions. So what is the first action? I hope you remember that my first action was that if I have an action as add to do. And friends, now you can see how I maintain the thing. When I press this control space, you can see very first line. It says that actually I don't have a default export. I have the named export. I will take a to do from my named export coming from the to do actions. So that's the case here. So what should happen when I do add a to do? Well, that's pretty clear, right? So when I say add to do, what has to be done, friends? I will write return keyword here. I have to just return something. But before I return, friends, don't you think so that I have to make sure the data should be validated? Yes, true. So I have to make sure that to do that is coming to me should actually have something with my validations. I simply say if the payload. Okay, before I come here, friends, let's go and just see that add to do. So friends, you can see for the action add to do, you can get the to do, and that is actually the payload only, correct? That is the payload only. So friend, make sure that I'm talking about this payload right now. I say if the payload, that's your action dot payload. If I write action dot payload, if the action dot payload, right? If the action dot payload equals to empty, right? Well, someone is trying to give me an empty to do. I should not take it, right? So what I should do, friends? I hope so that if it is an empty, I can do this thing, right? Or else I can do multiple things. It's up to you. If the action dot payload equals to empty, I should simply say whatever is there in the state, just return the same thing and just update the error that to do cannot be empty, right? That's what I'm looking for. That I should not get any empty to do. I cannot add this to do into my application state, right? That's correct, right? Else if I might have, right? I might have the action dot payload should have a value, right? I might have the action dot payload should have a different value. If the action dot payload dot length, if the action dot payload length is actually less than 8 characters that I mentioned, right? Again, I will do this to do must be at least 8 characters. That's what I mentioned, right? What's the else part? The last else if part, friends, what I need is that action dot payload dot length should not be more than how many characters? As I mentioned, I hope so. You have to just look into the readme file again. I mentioned about something 50. It should be more than 50. So I have to look for that as well. If the length is more than 50, I should write something like return state to do must be under 50 characters. Correct? Okay, so I hope you understood this thing, what the add to do will do. Correct? So friend, this is what I have planned about it, that add to do case is here completed, right? So is it really completed or do I need to actually add something more? That's correct. The else part, right? What the else part will say, friends. So if something is not wrong, I will simply say whatever is there in the state, please make it again same. whatever is there in the state, just make it like that, and the to do's is going to actually have my to do's, all the previous to do's, plus my current to that is coming up to me, that is action.payload. I hope so it makes sense now. Okay, that's what friends I have written here. So now can I modify this code and make it much better for me to understand? Yes, the number one line can be updated with this thing. I write this thing, right? Node action.payload, because empty string is also a falsy value. Okay, that's what I've done here. That makes sense now. Alright, so friends, is it really gonna work for me or not? We have to check it out, right? So we'll start with this only one, that add to do. If it works, then we'll move to the next stages. Okay, the last thing, it should be exported. So module.exports, and friend, in this case, I want to write simple thing that I want to export it as a default export. Okay, so module is going to export a default reducer. Simple, like that. Simple, nothing else. Alright, makes sense. Okay, so we'll check for the errors if they comes, right. Is it the live? So I might don't need to get the errors, but it could be. So for the last file, that is our main file, that is index.js, where actually I will create my store. I will do create store. I will actually dispatch actions here. I will actually check state updates here, and that's all I will check here, right? So I will try to get this all things done here. So first of all, well, actually you can see that actually I'm writing here only JavaScript normal, right? It's just normal JavaScript, and also here too I'm just writing normal JavaScript. Well, so writing normal JavaScript is not going to help you out to make Redux store. Well, as I learned, right, I have to do dispatch some actions. So friends, now it's for me to actually include my Redux into my picture, right? So Redux, please do come up, and we need actually you to work together, right? So Redux will actually come now. How come it will work here? So friends, what I have to do is I just need to make sure that my package.json file should actually have my Redux as a dependency. As of now, I can see there's nothing like even a dependency word mentioned here. So I need my application to actually be dependent upon the my Redux. So it's time for me to actually install my Redux. So I write npm install Redux. So friends, when I do this thing, it will simply take a little time to actually install Redux into my application, and then we can move further, because now without Redux I cannot do anything. So basically, if someone asks you, do you need Redux beforehand only to start the application and to start working on the reducer and the action? Answer is very clearly no, I don't need it. But if to have worked together, we need that Redux for sure. So I can see my application file has been updated, the package.json file, and you can see the dependencies actually included here. That is dependencies. We have Redux now. All right, close this file. I don't need terminal. Go back again. Right now, this module 2 is also not required. And now it's for me to create a store. So friends, I made my reducer, I made my action is for my store time. So how to create a store? So we have a function coming from my Redux only, that is create store, right? So I will write a create store method here. So it's not coming up. Let me just write again, because I might need this thing to come up again. So I write create store because it should come, right? All right, it's simply doing this thing. Let me just do this particular thing. I do a control space again so that it comes up. Okay, it's not coming up, so I can write it from myself, no issues. So I have to write const store, that is not a store, it's a create store. It should come from where? It should come from my require redux. Okay, the create store method returns a store. So friends, when I say redux needs a store, well, pretty sure, right? As I know, if I have to make a store, I should have a default reducer or default value for my state or the store value. That's the reason, friends, we pass my reducer here, right? So we simply pass a reducer here. So reducer should be part of it. And that reducer comes from where? It comes from a to-do reducer. Okay, make sure. Now, if I do this thing, friends, I just need to write this line. I'm all good to do everything, right? Let me just write here console log and just write about my store dot get state. Now, friends, okay, before I do get state, let me just see how exactly the store looks like without any get state stuff. Okay. Now, I hope so you learned about it that I have different files in different structure, right? And I want to combine all together into this index.js file. All right. What I'm doing here, friends, just see. You can see I don't need to go somewhere else. I simply go to my file, that is cd redux folder. Okay, as I mentioned everything into my redux folder. You can see very clearly redux folder contains everything, actions, reducer, and my index.js file as well. I say already, I simply go and run the index file and let's see what happens. Do I get some error or do I get something about store state? I get some error and let me try to fix it here. So somewhere the colon to do payload is there and I hope so pretty missed somewhere in the actions files. Let me just go there and what happened. Let me just check it out. I hope so I've just taken the word from here. I don't know what happened from my side. I did not did this thing. Okay, that payload came up there. Just silly mistake, guys. Okay, I did this mistake, might be. Now, friends, when I do this thing, you can see my store has a lot of things, right? It has a dispatch as a function. As a key, you can see the key and it has a function dispatch. It has a subscribe, it has a get state, it has a replace reducer and observable as well. Well, I don't have any concern with this all these things. I have only one concern that what exactly is my state. All right. And friends, that's the reason I will simply write store.getState method. The store has a getState method, right? As I can see very clearly, it is mentioned here, getState. And this function is going to get me something about the state data. I try to get my state data, friends. You can see that default I'm getting undefined, right? So my state has a default undefined as a value. Well, friends, I hope so. We did something wrong, right? That's the reason, friends, I will talk about it now. So how come the state is undefined? I made it, right? Now you can find easily what is the issue. So friends, you can see very clearly as I mentioned, the reducer returns a state, that it returns a new state. Can you please just check it out and just see where is the new state getting returned? Because this is quite easy to understand. Friends, you can see I'm talking about switch. I'm writing this case. So friend, if I don't have any case with add to do, what is the default case mentioned? Right? That's correct. So that is the reason, friends. Always remember, if you don't have any default case, you will get state as undefined. Or you can just write everything after the switch. That is the default case. And in the default case, friends, what I will write, I just simply return the current state, what exactly is there as my initial state. So will it work after writing this particular line? And I hope so, pretty sure that now I can see my to-dos and the error as null value. I hope so it makes sense to all of you how exactly my state comes into the picture by writing the default statement into my reducer. All right, that's pretty sure. I hope so clear. Now, friends, it's time for me to actually add a to-do. And how to actually add a to-do? That's the next question, right? So I don't need to get a state again and again, friends, right? So I will do something. I say, okay, store, please do subscribe. And whatever you do subscribe, just do this thing. Simple, like that. So what this subscribe will do? So whenever you change a state, right? Whenever you dispatch an action, right? Whenever you dispatch an action, friends, it actually do this thing. When you dispatch an action, the reducer is called with the current state and the action is dispatched, right? And friends, whenever you change the state, every time this subscribe method will get called up and it will print the state data. Okay, let's see. Number one, do you see this thing, right? I can see very clearly I'm not dispatching any action. This is not printing anything, correct? Now Let's try to do something about it, right? I want to dispatch some actions. So let's write store.dispatch. And friends, when I say dispatch, I need to dispatch something, right? So what exactly to dispatch, friends? I learned about that one method is there, add to do, right? So we learned about that add to do function. That add to do action say that, friends, the add to do action say that I need to actually have one to do, okay? And that to do will be passed as a payload. That's what I need. So friends, I go here into my store or index.js file. I say, okay, I will call you and I will pass something. I say Redux demo to do one. I hope so, friends. This is not more than 50, right? This is not less than 8 characters. So if I try to add this thing, let's try to see what actually happens with my state. I hope so. We can see very clearly my to dos got inserted, correct? Right? All right, friends. If I go this thing again, right? If I say add to do 2, can we see that I have two to dos now? The latest one is my next state. It says two to dos Kuldeep. You have now two to dos. It means my add to do is working fine, right? Can we do a validation now also? What is my first validation, friends? Empty to do, right? So friends, when I have empty to do, I should get an error about it, right? And it should not be added. That's what I'm looking for. Do I get this thing, friends? After I try to add the last to do, that is actually empty to do, I can see my last to do's are actually inserted, and last one I'm getting an error. To do cannot be empty. Perfect, right? So can I have one more example of validation? Yes, if it is less than 8 characters, right? So friends, how I can write less than 8 characters? So we can write simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? I can see very clearly 6 characters, and let's try to get this one. I can see still to do cannot be empty as my value. So it means my value is there and I have to just update my reducer. Is it correct or not? Let's check it out. So when I say, friends, this thing, you can see that my error is here, right? And currently the state that actually I'm writing this length is less than 8, right? So what is happening here? Why it is not working? What do you think? Why I got inserted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and why I still get the to do cannot be empty? So friends, make sure when I do this kind of stuff, I have to logically build my data, right? As you can see, the errors to do cannot be empty is here, and you can see very clearly mentioned action dot payload. It means somewhere this validation got failed and it came to directly here. And friends, make sure when I do add to do, the error should be null here, because I know if I add to do, the error should be by default null. Okay, so what I'm writing here, guys, friends, as I know the spelling is not correct, right? That's the only issue, friends, that I can see from my application, right? And I hope that's pretty easy to understand that spelling mistakes or the typo errors are pretty clear, right? Easy. So we can see now the to do must be at least 8 characters. That's what I was expecting, and it worked totally fine. The next one, guys, or next one, friends, that we have is actually if it is more than 50 characters. So write more than 50 characters. So we can write any random stuff. Any random stuff can be more than 50 characters long. It's more than enough. Okay. The last one is, friends, I can see it's more than enough now. If I try this, friends, I hope so. I can see the to do must be at least under 50 characters. So it means every time whenever I play around with my Redux, it works totally fine, right? So my testing is done with my application where actually I try to add to do, where I have multiple options, right? Where I have one option perfect to do, no validation check failure, where I have empty to do, validation check true, and I got error, that is empty to do cannot be there. Validation type 2 where actually we have less than 8 characters, I get that error actually also. Validation type 3 where we have more than 50 characters, I get that last error, it should not be under 50 character, I got that error too. I also friends, this works totally fine, and what I expected, it worked accordingly. Now if I have to understand this thing, I hope so it's quite clear how exactly the tools can be there, right? So let's move further now to my reducer, because only the thing that I have to play around is now reducer only. So you can see that I'm writing this thing. Now what is the next case? I have case number 2. What is the case? That is update to do. And that update to do is also coming from where? It is coming from my to do actions. So you can see my update to do is also coming from my update action. And friends, how to update? And I hope so if you have to update, you just need to look for something ID. Okay. So how to update to do? First of all, I have to update the ID. But friends, I don't have any ID here, so I will talk about index only, right? So what is an ID for me? So I will talk about only an index. That is an ID for me as of now in my application. Okay. So before I talk about this thing, friends, I want to talk about simple normal Java function that you should understand and you should know before we start this thing, right? Because everywhere actually I'm talking about only JavaScript, right? So if we know JavaScript, then only we can talk about this application and Redux, right? So let me just share my browser screen so that you can see that what I'm going to talk about. So I will go to actually a browser. So my Google will do something. Well, correct. So I will go to Google and I will simply search for one function with the name splice. Well, I did something mdn, that is splice mdn. And friends, when I talk about slice, right, what is this function does? We have to understand this thing because I'm going to use this function, right? And how this function works. So I refer this mdn web docs most of the time while I do learn about something about JavaScript. So I recommend please try to learn about this thing. So what the splice method does, friends? The splice method of array instance changes the content of an array by removing, it says by removing or replacing existing element or adding new elements. Well, friends, well, I don't need to actually add. I just need to update the current one only. So how come I can do this thing? Can I play around with this data or can I delete the data? So this function only will actually help me out. Let's take an example here. So just take an example. You can see Jan, Feb, March, April, June. We have this data, and you can see I'm passing something 1, 0, and Feb. And you can see very clearly that after Jan I need a Feb here, right? You can see I'm writing 1. What is the 1 actually? What is actually an index, right? You're trying to say that I index 1 I want to add, and you can see I'm writing 0 as well. Now what does this 0 does? And the value is actually very clearly mentioned, the Feb, right? To understand this demo, to actually understand this demo, we have to go little down and see what the different parameters I need to pass. So as different ways, or I can say function overloading about the splice method, you can see that you have to pass start, you have to pass start or delete count, you have to pass a start or delete count, you have to pass item value. What do you want to add? You have to pass start, delete count, 2 items. You have to pass start, delete count, and 2 or multiple items till n. It means if you want to delete an item, you don't need to use anything. You just need to use these two options: splice, start, and delete count. You can delete. But friends, do I need to delete or do I have to update something? Well, actually, when I do update, I will go for this item. It's splice, start, delete count, and the item one. Friends, if I take that example, I hope so pretty clear. For my current example, I have to take this only, nothing else. If I run this, friends, you can see that my data will get this data. You can see after gen we can get say fab, right? But friends, do I have to actually add something or have to update something, right? Currently, my scenario is not like this thing, right? I have to update something. Well, friends, if I have to update, my answer is very clearly mentioned here. I have to write months. Let it be that you said, Kuldeep, I have to update index, right? And what is the index? You said that, Kuldeep, I will give you index value. I say, okay, give me the index value. You mentioned 2. I say, okay, no issues. Give me a 2, I give the value. Update it, right? And friends, if I do a console log of this data, you can see that my data will be simply updated. Can we get this updated? Updated as index number 2. Pretty clear, right? So for this one is pretty clear, but for delete operation, friends, I will do this one, right? Make sure that I will do this one. Okay. Now guys, come back to my VS Code because I need to use that only. So friends, update to do says you don't have to worry about it. You just need to write state dot to do's, and from that to do, friends, I might get some index. So I write const index that should come from action dot payload because that action dot payload has something about it, right? And friends, I hope to see that action when I do update. While I'm updating, friends, you can see the payload contains an ID. So let me just update this ID with my index for a better understanding. Simple, nothing else. Okay. So when I go to my this file reducer, from that, friends, I can see that I'm getting two things. I'm getting this const index and the new to do. Okay. Now, friends, I will take this index. I will update a new to do. Okay. Now you might be thinking, oh friends, that I need to make sure when I do update, I should also check for this actions, this data again. Correct? So when I update this thing, friends, I should check for this data again. That's your task. If I do this thing, friends, then what you will learn? You need to do this thing. You have to create the same application by doing the same task. Okay. As of now, I'm just updating this new to do. Simple as like that. Nothing else. All right. Now, friends, after do this thing, if I write return state, as I updated my state, friends, right? So let's try to see update to do. Now make sure, friends, I'm writing this return state, update to do, I have to call. And if everything works fine, friend, I will get the state updated, right? But see, now I don't need to discuss this all things, so I won't ask my store to do despite this all actions, right? I want my store to just play around only what I want to do now. So friends, I don't want to see most of the stuff that I have done, so I will write store dot dispatch. And what is the current method that I will dispatch now, right? Now I will try to update to do. So friends, when I say update to do, you can see that update to do say that Kuldeep, you have to pass me index, right? So friends, I will pass index number 1 and I say updated to do. Okay. Friends, when I say updated to do, so I should have two data. That's why I just need these 2 lines of code. Okay. Then I will do update. Friends, understand this thing, right? So this is going to get one data inserted, this is going to get second data inserted in my to do, and this one is going to update the second one only because that index is 1 only, correct? So friends, when I try this code out, actually the code gives me something not exact that I'm looking for. It gives me something a different answer. I expected something else, but friends, I got something else, a different answer. You can still see the data is still the same. Or is it updated? So basically my data is getting updated. Simple, right? It worked totally fine. So this will work totally fine as of now. But friends, let me tell you, never ever do play with this data here, because if you think so this is working fine, that is totally fine. But Redux will give you this error, right? So friends, make sure whenever you do update any state, you wrap up an object and give the data that you have updated, like this say. It should be a new object always. I'm saying again, friends, it should be a new object again because this is Redux only, not React. So when I go to React, it won't understand that you actually updated the data. Make sure you understand this thing very carefully, friends. If you update a state, it should be like this way. The new object, whether there's nothing updated or not, it should be a new object always, except the default one. Now, friends, if I update this thing, do I get the same answer till now? Make sense? Same answer, right? So I hope so you understand this thing very carefully that I can do update as well. The last case that I have to do is just a delete one, right? I don't need to do much about it. So I write delete, that is case, that is my delete to do. The delete to do will come from where? Again from my actions. And friend, in this case, I have to just write const id should come from action payload. I simply say that state, please do something about it, right? I can write state dot to do's dot splice. I have to learn about this method right now only. I will write id. Friends, I will write one. Let's try to see what actually happens when I do this one. Okay. So I'll do this one, friends. I try to write state dot to do's dot splice this one, and I want to just do this thing. And after do I do this thing, I write state dot to do's equals to this. At the end, friends, I will do simply return the same state with a dot 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 or the ellipsis operator. Now, friends, after I do this thing, is for me to check now. Make sure that everything was working totally fine. I updated the data. So let me just check once again. The data is getting updated. So I will update that updated data, updated to do only. Okay. So that is index number one. So friends, after I do update, right? Let's just take a simple 1 second of data. Set timeout. I will take the example here. I try to do this thing. Taking 2 seconds for to delete. So when I say delete, it should be delete to do action. Oh, sorry for that. Okay. So let's check it out. Does it work or not? I took seconds, and after 2 seconds, friends, you can see the data is deleted, right? And I hope so. We learned about how the Redux actually works and how I can dispatch the basic different kind of actions in my to-do application, right? And also we learned about the different errors. Friends, remember there might be multiple errors that I can do. You can see very carefully I can give you multiple ways to do the errors. If I try to delete, that id is not there, the index is not there, can I delete that data? Answer is very clearly mentioned, no. So you can play around this thing, try to make your own errors after thinking about logics, how it could be done, how I can make it more clear and more suitable for the people, right? That's what I need to understand today, right? So in the next session, friends, I will talk about how actually I use this Redux into my React application by taking the same example and connect with our Redux to my React application. For that, we'll talk about the next week. I hope so. Till then, we learned about a lot. So now it's for me to take the questions from your side. Do you have any question or do you have any suggestions for me so that I can take care of in the next time? So could you please help me out with this, your inputs, friends? I'm here to just seek your inputs now. And friends, what the next thing that I'm going to do, let me share my screen that what the next thing friends will do. The next time when we talk about, we'll talk about the same, this application, right? The same thing that I do today, that is going to be part of my React now in the next time. Okay. So till then, I just need to see your inputs for my today's session, how you liked it, and do you have any suggestion for me to make it more good for all of you? So any suggestions, friends? I'm here to look for your suggestions. You can just help me out with your inputs. I'm always happy with that.